Welcome back to the show where Dana and I, debunk myths.
I feel like I should have, when we were signing on, I was thinking along those lines, like those old 50s cop
Yeah,
shows where the guy
yeah.
would come on with the voice and it'd be adult ADHD, fact or fiction.
Fact or fiction. I mean,
We know, right? Do we know the answer to this
okay. Let's just start with the why are Dana and I fired up about this?
one?
And that is that one of Dana's students were told that by a psychologist that
Yeah,
adult
yeah.
ADHD does not exist.
My first question was, but we're doing adult ADHD assessments in that clinic. So how does that work?
And does ADHD go away when you turn 18?
Oh, that was the other thing they said. This person thought that you grow out of it. That
Yeah.
thank you for hitting my memory cells. Yeah. Do we grow
Yeah.
out of ADHD? Can you be diagnosed with ADHD as an adult if you weren't diagnosed as a kid? Yes, you can.
Yes.
Do
Yes.
you grow out of it? No, you don't. You
Because it's a
cope. Maybe you're
it's
cope.
a neurological
Exactly.
profile. It's the
Exactly.
way you're
Exactly.
wired.
That's
Okay.
right. That's right.
Okay. It's
So
just
here's the thing about people that get diagnosed as adults. The DSM criteria technically says that, like, if it's being diagnosed in adulthood, there has to have been these signs of it when you were a kid, right? But it doesn't really go on to necessarily describe like what the signs were. So you could have someone who maybe had trouble reading, or maybe they had comprehension issues, or maybe they got comments from the teachers like they don't sit still in class, or they're disruptive, or whatever it is. But there's always going to be those kids that are ADHD who didn't do those things, right? For whatever reason. For example, girls tend to conform more to social norms than boys, and they might daydream more than actually doing physical sorts of things. I have assessed so many people that absolutely are ADHD who were put in gifted classes as kids. So it can happen. It's a thing. What about folks that are like my age whose parents are long gone, or they didn't know what ADHD was then? It wasn't even a recognized thing. So there's no like record of it. And then we talk about, can people be their own reporter? What we mean is, can they go back to their history and like accurately report things that would be signs of that? Which is ridiculous. If you have someone who's 60 years old, are they going to remember what happened in third grade? No. Most people don't have, most people aren't like me and have all of their grade cards from their entire, K through 12, uh, which all said the same thing, which I'm not ADHD, by the way, but it was always, she doesn't try hard enough and doesn't do her homework and doesn't pay attention.
yeah.
So there can also be like kids that aren't ADHD, who had the signs of ADHD as a kid, but that's not what was going on. It was something else. In my case, autism and dyslexia. But to say there's no such thing as adult ADHD, that it can't be helped by treatment or medication, and to say that you grow out of it is absolute horse hockey. I can say that, right? Not the F
Yeah.
word.
Hmm.
Yeah. And not to disparage horses. I love the smell of horse manure. I'm going to go off on a total tangent. I love horses. Uh, but geez, maybe I have ADHD. No, I'm just kidding. That sense of judgment from an outsider who supposedly is someone who's in the know, and how damaging that can be. And your symptoms might get better because you're learning to cope in various ways. But I know a lot of adults that are really suffering because they haven't figured out a magic potion to deal with ADHD, and it just gets worse and worse and worse, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about on this podcast about folks that are autistic and ADHD, and sort of the push and pull around those. Are there various times in your life where you decompensate in terms of your organization, and then your ADHD shows more, right? Are there parts where your ADHD? I always imagine like the the two factions of yourself, this autistic part that wants to have routine and things be predictable, and the ADHD part of yourself that's like, oh, I'm so bored and wants to, create kind of craziness, right? And they're
Yeah.
at each other's throats all the time.
Yeah.
But you can't, and then that's not even to speak of the fact that ADHD presents in a multitude of ways and a multitude of severities in terms of impact on their life. So you can have someone that really is ADHD that hasn't taken medication and kind of doesn't feel like they need to, and they can get by because they've structured their life in a way that they can. And then someone else who absolutely is suffering. I had someone I assessed relatively recently, definitely diagnosed that person with ADHD. They got medication and it's changed their lives like overnight. And I hear this a lot. People will say,
Hmm.
I go on medication and the voices stop. Not like they're psychotic, but all of the racing thoughts quiet down for the first time. And that's not like they feel like now I'm not in my head, but now I can like have a rational thought about something else without it going over here. That's very
Yep.
telling, right? So
Yep.
yes, you can have adult ADHD not diagnosed to since until adulthood without being clear of the signs prior to it, right? It just means that you were in a situation or managed to be in your life in such a way that it didn't become the primary quote problem. And there's a lot of reasons people are able to kind of pull that off, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think about inattentive presentation,
Mm-hmm.
ADHD, which I often
Mm-hmm.
call like hidden ADHD, because the
Yeah.
distractibility and the movement is in the mind. So on the
Yes. Yeah.
surface, you don't see a hyper, like what we used to call hyperactive. I mean, it's
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
labeled that, but someone is like kind of out, like your classic, what people traditionally think of ADHD. There's a class clown out of the seat, can't stop
Yeah.
moving, blah,
Right.
blah, blah,
Right.
can't stop talking.
That's
But
right.
that the inattentive types, a lot of, I mean, you don't necessarily see though that external presentation, but the
That's right.
internal world is very busy and very
Exactly.
disorganized and very
Right.
distracting,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
My other thought here too is that sometimes we can get by because the demands of life are
Yeah.
that way. And
Yeah.
then we become adults, which sometimes, I mean, like
We sometimes
adulting,
become adults, or we.
I mean, like, I mean, I'm just saying, like, there's so much of adulting that
Oh yeah.
really
Yeah.
sucks. Like,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of mundane things you have to do as an
Do
adult.
I have to do
There's,
my laundry? Do I have to
yeah,
clean the dishes? Is
it
it
is the
imperative? Yeah, it's just stuff like that. Yeah.
the bane of their
Mhm.
existence. Like, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
really, right? And then we start to see that symptomatology, that struggle, those
Yeah.
challenges, because the demands of life have changed,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
just hits them squarely in the mouth of their
That's right.
ADHD, right? Like it just, and so, but to say that it doesn't exist, that adult ADHD doesn't exist,
It's harmful. I mean,
is,
that's just and wrong. Yeah. It's just wrong.
I I
That's what
I
I did when I heard about it. I just went, I didn't even know what to say.
this is also, here's the dangerous part about this.
Mm-hmm.
This is a licensed psychologist
Yeah.
who's practicing, Dana,
Yeah. Yeah.
who's also teaching future psychologists.
Yeah. Supervising, but not teaching. But yeah, I
Oh,
know it's
sorry, supervisor.
to me. My Pollyanna mind is like, oh, the whole world of psychology exists like you and I want it to be and see it, and then I'll hear these stories, and I'm like hearing from colleagues of mine who are one person is a person of color, go to a division meeting that's about diversity and being told by the other psychologists in that meeting that that person isn't, what was the wording that was used? Is something like you're it's not apparent enough, you're not brown enough. And I'm just like, I mean, those are things that if you heard in general, you'd be like, what the hell? But to hear it from these people that are licensed psychologists who are in a division of something like APA, who are running a division of that, having that view is blows my mind. But there are all that's what's out there. I mean, that's sort of the danger of what could be out there. I think about how many people that I've heard that are in therapy or go to therapy and bring up the idea of autism. We've talked about this, and
Yeah.
their therapists just go, oh, no, and how harmful that's been. And that's the same thing for ADHD. It's getting plugged in that, oh, it's the flavor of the month. Oh, someone saw something on
Yeah.
TikTok and
TikTok.
now they
Mhm.
think they're ADHD. Yes, there's always going to be some people that that's true for, but it's such a minute amount that you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and not listen to these people that are saying, "Oh my God, I finally know what's going on with me. I watch these videos, and I'm like, yes, 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 yes." Those are like examples of seeing something that someone who comes to me and says, "Oh my God, I noticed this, this, and this." I'm not going to say, "Don't give me the list you wrote. I'm the person who knows everything here." I'm going to be like, "Yeah, give me that. I want to see it. Tell me what notes you took. Distill it for me." I would much rather have you tell me I made a list of the ADHD traits that I've noticed rather than, oh, I noticed I have trouble concentrating and maybe this, that, the other thing. Give it to me fully formed. I love that, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But that's also for me as a psychologist, I'm going to have other sources of information to put that with. I'm not just going to take their list and say, ding, yes, you've got this. But it's this idea of gatekeeping, and it's this idea of that colonized view. I'm the expert, I'm the doctor, and I'm going to tell you what is happening in reality. We know that there can be things that color that. I tease my one of my colleagues all the time who works in forensics, who does competency evals for people to stand trial, right? He doesn't believe in DID. Believe in DID. Me and another guy that are totally trauma informed are like, I can't. And then they'll sort of laugh and they'll say, no, no, of course I know it's a thing, but in my job work, people try to use it. So he's seeing all these examples of people trying to feign that to get out of, murdering somebody, right? So you can sort of see if you explore it enough, you'd be like, okay, that's a bias you have in that particular field. I kind of get it. But to say that this thing doesn't exist in an entire population because that's the worldview you hold is insane. Yeah. Or the fact that this person has almost every privilege variable that you can have. And so they haven't had to look outside their own little ivory tower ever. I don't think I have to worry about that person watching this. They would never watch this podcast. Yeah.
I mean, and
Some
even
of my
if
some of my
he
students might.
did, he did. Yeah. I mean, I think like this is what worries me. What worries me is that
Hmm.
people can get harmed by this. That's my
Yes.
worry about this, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and that most people that are doing self-diagnosis or they're coming to a psychologist and going, listen,
Hmm.
these things
Hmm.
have resonated with me. These clips on TikTok, this thing on YouTube, this thing on
Right.
Instagram or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's resonated with me because of X, Y, and Z. And I want to
Yeah.
evaluate
Or
this
we
and I
ask
want to
more,
see this.
right? Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And assessment has never been and should never be we use one source of information and then we
Right.
make a diagnosis. Any
Yeah.
psychologist that's doing that is not practicing competently. For those
Yeah.
of us that do
We
assessment,
do a battery
we
and
uh,
history taking
yep,
and everything else. Yeah. Yeah.
we do. I mean, testing for ADHD directly, there's some lovely ways to do that. Actually,
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
quickly. They hate it. It's
Yeah.
probably the
Yep.
worst 15 minutes of their life. I wouldn't want to do a CPT test myself, but um, you know what I'm talking about,
Right.
Dana. Um,
Yeah. Yep.
there are direct. We test it directly. We
Hmm.
test it with
Hmm.
rating measures that have been research validated, and we've
Right.
spoken about empirically validated, blah 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 blah.
Right.
But we are
Right. Right. Right.
taking information from a whole host of sources
Right.
to use our
Yeah.
clinical judgment on this.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
it isn't just, ooh. hey, and if it does help someone get the support they need, whether that's through a medical,
Mhm.
whether it's medical support or behavioral support, or environmental
Mhm.
support,
Yeah.
coaching, whatever this is, why wouldn't we want that for people? I'm just not sure
Yeah,
what
I
like
like
what
think about
what's
people. I always
what's the
ask about
downside?
things like,
No.
what kind of structure, if they did really well in school, what kind of structure did they have? And I've had people say, like, oh, my mom sat down with me every day after school and we went through the homework together.
Oh yeah.
And then I crashed and burned when I went to college. I've
Yeah.
talked about that transition thing. It's
Oh
like,
yeah.
that's very telling, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus another kid who gets no intervention and maybe doesn't even graduate high school, right?
Yep.
And everything in between. I mean, we see those
Yep.
things. You have to explore that more. And if you don't have access to that historical data, it doesn't mean you should rule that out completely. It means you should explore more, right? That it was probably there all along, and now it's finally being found
Right.
out. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Because the current demands, the
yep.
environmental demands have changed
Hmm.
something.
Yeah, or they
So
can't compensate
again,
anymore. Yeah,
that's right. And this is again why we use a social model of disability.
right. Yeah, the people that can hold it
Hi.
together, and then once they partner up and then start having kids, for example, and that's when the wheels come off. And I'm like, well, that's pretty predictable. Of
Yeah.
course, now, yeah,
Yeah.
you have all that
Yeah.
attention pulling you every which way. Of course, that's going to worsen. Yeah.
Oh yeah. We know that marriages and children will um emphasize any vulnerability you had.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right.
You
That's
can
exactly right.
guarantee that any
Yeah,
vulnerability you had
yeah,
moving
yeah.
into a marriage or becoming a parent is just going to get amplified.
Yeah, or other stressors, and
Yeah.
how it's dealt with. I've been meaning to ask you if you've seen this. I think it might be a year or two old now, but I watched it. It's a documentary called The Disruptors. Have you heard of this one?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
It's a documentary, and I think it's three different kids, there might be four, and they're from varied backgrounds, and it follows and different ages, and it follows these kids through getting ADHD diagnoses.
Oh.
And then what happens from that? One kid gets put on medication. The mom is really resistant to medication, gets put on medication, and then he's not even himself anymore. He's this kid that doesn't have joy in life. I mean, ultimately, they make the decision to take him off and put him on a
Mm-hmm.
very low dose of something else.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really, I love the way it describes that and shows that particular case, because it's so different by kid, and how the school responds and how the parents are seeing ADHD. Is it something to sort of be cured or not? It is an identity variable. The kids are not going to grow out of this. How it gets seen by kids at various ages and so on. Are they being marginalized? Not surprisingly, that the one mama didn't want to just rush to put her kids on medication. And by the way, that kid took the longest to get diagnosed, and it's a African American mom and her son. You could just predict these things at this point, right? Of course, they're going to be
Yeah.
the ones that are going to get resources last. And then she's really afraid that she'll get the resource and it won't ever get changed for predictable. So much about it is the environment, what's going on in that family, that immediate, school around it, the community, and all those layers out all have an impact, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not looking at it systemically, it isn't just about this person sitting in front of you saying, I have these symptoms. And to the observer, it looks like they just started. They probably haven't just started. A good assessor will know what questions to ask to root out and see if there were signs of
Yeah.
it earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So the verdict is
It
adult
is.
ADHD, fact or
It is a
fiction?
thing. Fact. Yeah.
I feel like we needed like a stamp,
We need
like,
one of those
like
big
a gavel.
fact.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Totally.
Imagine. Okay.
Yeah. Oh
Well,
my
now
God.
that we've put that one to bed.
Yeah. So let us know if that's happened to you. We'd love to hear.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sorry if it did
Yeah.
happen to you. Yeah.
Yes, we are. And by the way, it won't surprise us,
Yeah. Yeah.
sadly.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Be good to you, be good to others, and we will catch you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye, everybody.